Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to episode 2 of the Gen AI podcast. We can't seem to get all four of us on the pod, but it's awesome to have Mr. Greg Lawton on episode 2. You missed episode 1, Greg. How are you? Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much. The reason I missed episode 1 was my daughter was born, and how am I? I think I'm on about 4 or 5 hours sleep. I'm not too sure, but let's go for it. Let's crack it on.
Let's go for it indeed. I'm sure you've learned some important life skills and there's plenty more to learn, but we won't talk about that too much right now. I'm sure our listeners want to get stuck into the content. Of course, apologies from the other two. I think it's about 3 a.m. Wherever Alan is, and I believe Val is riding a camel in the desert in Saudi. So good luck to both of those guys. We promise we'll get all four of us together. We do exist. None of us are Superman and have two personas. Maybe you are, Greg. I think you're Superman at the moment, or at least you feel like you are. With the lack
You
of
and I
sleep
have
you
got
get.
very different perceptions of how I am, right?
So, just to recap, I guess, for those listening in for the first time, in the last episode, we delved into, I guess, what is generative AI, setting a bit of a baseline. What are the various, I guess, what does MML mean? What does ML mean? What does, all these various types of ways to structure data mean? And learn from it. So it's an interesting space because I think we can delve further in those. But we also had audience participation, and that is really key. If you are listening on YouTube, remember, hit subscribe because then you can actually ask us questions live. And we'll get Greg to answer them because I'm the dummy on this podcast. But we had some interesting questions last time around, Greg, around, generative AI sort of assisting, augmenting, supporting project planning. We also had a lot around, how does generative AI assist in the early stages of projects on risk and identifying risk before we even go into necessarily design phases and delivery phases as well. So that was hugely interesting. I think, I guess to start off and pick up from that perspective, I'm quite interested because I was thinking about a last episode, and whilst we concentrated a lot on AI, there's also this part of understanding how humans, i.e., project professionals, and the technology AI coexist and what that might look like. Now, we spoke about people having to upskill, but once they're upskilled, what does that actually look like operationally? Do you have I mean, I know you have a view, but have you thought about this? Are there sort of different strands that you've gone, how does AI and people coexist to deliver projects with better outcomes?
Yeah, of course. Well, this is I would assume what Alan and I think about every single day because we own AI companies that are creating AI that needs to work with people. And over the course of the last half decade, I'd actually say that the greatest insight I've I've got in how to do this is actually it from history books. What we're going through now is special and unique in that generative AI hasn't been the thing before, but it is not special or unique in the fact it's humans inventing new ways of being more productive. And you could go back to the invention of the canals, and then the invention of the engine, and then the invention of rail, and then the invention of planes, and then the invention of the internet and computers and utility. You don't utilities. So, for example, you don't have to walk to the water well; it just gets pumped to your house. You can go through all of these, and you can learn lessons in how does human behavior change and transform given this new access. The long story short here is that it's it's very rare, from what I can see, for the outcome of a profession to change. Doctors have had the same goals since the Greek times. but they just have more ways of going about achieving that goal. You could try and, take the balance the elements back in ancient Greece through whatever, or today you can have surgery. It's the same thing. And in Project Land, the same principles are trying to be applied since we built the pyramids and we built the wonders. As today, we're trying to deliver projects to scope, to time, to budget, all of this kind of thing. And what I just say is the micro skills and the micro tasks of how we achieve certain parts of that process will naturally evolve. And I actually think what will happen in projects is actually what's already happened in IT for the past 40 years, is that people will have to micro skill up. Not skill up, because skill up is, I need to learn fundamentally new things. Micro skill up is things like, download this app and this is how you ask questions. Cool, I got it. And then, so it's super easy to learn, but you'll need to do hundreds of those over, 3 to 5 years, and then. So I see it as a much more smooth trajectory. Now, if you look at the end of that compared to the beginning, that's going to look transformational, because you'll have, and you and I have joked about this, saying, how many people are alive today in Project Land who don't use computers? There was a period in time where the answer was zero. Computers didn't exist. 0 people use computers. Now 100% of people use computers. At some point in human history, there has been a transition. And that will happen with AI. Right now, I think it's about 5 or 10% of project people use AI. Within 12 months, it'll be 50. And then, there'll be a kind of a longer tail at the end, but within 2 years, it'll be 90. And at some point, there won't be people employed who don't use AI of some sort. But the underlying fundamentals of what they're trying to achieve won't change. And that's the kind of macroscopic perspective that I bring to the thought of how are people interacting with AI. Number one is, let's stop thinking of it as something that we've never encountered before.
Yeah.
Humanity knows what it's doing about this.
Yeah, and you talk about sort of micro learning, and there's very many ways and different sources of learning. I guess, how do people wade through the treacle, so to speak, of what the best sources are to learn about this stuff? What's to borrow a phrase, what's fake news, right, versus where you can actually learn? Is it the universities? Are there institutions? Is it using the likes of your chat GPTs and Bard to learn about itself? How do you go about understanding what the tech does?
So there's 3 fundamental ways of doing that, and then a middle ground, which is, in my view, the fake news. So if we take the spectrum of learning, at one end is like the most quick, easiest, cheapest, fastest, but can also be the most confusing way. Just do it. Just literally pick the thing up. Like, it's the equivalent of just get a car and start driving. And you'll kind of, it'll stall a load and you won't know what but you'll figure it out to a certain level very, very quickly. Like, within a couple of hours, you'll get it. And it's the same kind of with AI. I just go to Nodes and Links, or go to ChatGPT or whatever, and just play with it. And you kind of get a sense of where it is and what it's doing very quickly. The other element, which I'm sure Alan will smile at, is literally just go and try and buy this kind of stuff. Because if you go and try and buying it, all the companies have a process so that they teach you how to use it, so you get free training. The other end, like you said, is the formal courses. Now, the challenge I have with formal courses is that the business of formal courses is selling courses. So one, they're slow to, either they're too fast to develop because they're just trying to get a quick buck, or they're so slow to develop they're irrelevant. And for me, it's like I'm not saying I've tried every course, but I would personally have hesitations doing a large formal course. If it was someone like Alan going, I'm doing an afternoon in London, let's go crack it, where I know he's a world expert at what he does, I'd be like, hell yeah, like I'm there tomorrow. Like, that's what I want to listen to. I want to listen to those kinds of people. But if it was like, the University of Boringland has put on this 7-week course, and I'd be like,
I feel like if you did something like that, by the end of the course, whatever they were teaching you would be outdated because of the speed at which things change.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless it's the fundamentals, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be the fundamentals. You'd be able to go in and, AI is this, and this is how we can use it, and this, and, you'd be able to put it into a 3-year development plan, which would be irrelevant after 4 weeks. And then it's like, okay, well, there you go.
Yeah. So I think what you're getting at is, rather than trying to necessarily understand in detail what's happening under the hood, understand the concepts and the theory of how it works rather than how you can recreate it, because it takes massive, large, really intelligent teams to create AI, right? But if you understand the basic concepts of how it works...
I'll give an example of this. Like, writing a project report. We all write project reports. We know what a project report should look like. If I can go to a piece of AI and go, write me a project report, and it writes a good one, do I care how it figured it out? I've got my good project report. I don't care.
Yeah.
What I care about is how much did it cost me and how much time did it take? Now, if it would take me 6 hours to write a really good project report, and with an AI I could do it in 30 minutes, and it would, add another half hour for me changing things to make it to my level of standard, say who cares how the algorithms work? Like, yeah. I got my report, and I'm checking the end result. So it's for me, it's about really being very specific with the definitions of kind of what is your concern of these things. Now, if there was a piece of AI that was fully driving the car that my newborn daughter is in, no, I'm at that steering wheel. Like, go away. No. Like, until that's been tried on 1 billion people and not one person has been injured, my newborn daughter's not going anywhere near that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, we touched...
Writing a report that I can change before it goes out, have a crack at it, mate. Like, fine, I don't care.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think we touched on in the first episode on, drones and airplanes and self-flying planes and self-driving cars, and it's interesting on the human aspect as well. And I guess if we bring it back to that, now let's fast forward and say, okay, everyone understands what it does and how it works, and everyone's okay with it. How, if I'm a project manager, right? How do I balance AI recommendations with human intuition? Because that's quite a tough one, a tough nut to crack, right? You've got someone that's been in the industry, got 20, 30 years of experience, and they don't have the data, but they go, I just feel like this is the right way to go about something, yet it's something that's different to what AI is recommending. How do you balance that?
So let's unpack that a little bit, because that has quite... The reason why that's a complicated question to answer is because there's so many moving parts, so many variables to it. The first variable is who's accountable. Is the AI accountable? Will the AI get fired if I make a bad choice? Which is number one. Number two, how mission critical is this decision? Because if it's a mission, if it's and let's not kid ourselves on real mission critical versus fake mission critical. It's like, if this is absolutely core to the business model or the safety of our people, that's a different kind of decision to something which will flow under the bridge and doesn't really impact. So basically, we've got an impactful thing, we've got an importance element to us thing, and then we've also got what the AI is doing. So if you've got a piece of AI that is automating defined processes, that is different than a piece of AI that is creating assets from unstructured data that you can't see, which is different than a piece of AI that is suggesting ways forward derived from your data, which is different than a piece of AI which is suggesting techniques you might want to use based on the historic books of project management. That, like, they're all very different things. So for me, to answer the question really requires context. And at the end of the day, the way I think about it is, just imagine it's an employee who's working for you. What, like, would you just trust, depending on the decision, dependent on its importance to us, dependent on the methodology being all of this, you would naturally go, I'm going to have a look at this. So, for example, Dale, imagine I'm an employee of yours. You're serving one of your customers, and you want to know when the project will finish. Okay, the last day of the project. Forget AI. I'm an employee of yours. If I came to you and said, yeah, Dale, it'll be February 21st. And you were like, have you got anything more? No, it'll be February 21st. You'd look to me and go, it's not quite what I'm paying you for here. Whereas if I came to you and went, so Dale, I've come to you and I've taken their schedule, I've found errors in it and worked with the project team to correct it. So we've now got a good basis of evidence. And what I've done is used a triangulation of methodologies. I've taken the productivity rates that they've outturned for the last 6 months and used them going forward. I've taken their change in uncertainty rates and used that as my second triangulation. And my third triangulation is I've leveraged past data using machine learning to give me an estimate. The three of those numbers are all saying around the 21st of February, give or take a month or two. How would you feel about that answer?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the more comprehensive you can be, more context specific answer you can get. For me, it's not a dichotomy of one versus the other. It's understanding. You're quite right. It's understanding the context of the situation and saying, okay, well, you know, where's the track record? If I take the data, what is the data telling me? If I take human intuition, what is it telling me? How far off is it from each other, those two solutions or answers? Perhaps there's a middle ground between those two scenarios as well that we haven't explored. There's a third alternative.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. It's that question was designed to be a bit provocative, as you're probably aware. But I think it's important because people do put the split between AI and humans, and I don't think it should be. I don't think it's a an or. I think it's an and. It's how do we use the technology alongside what we know and do as human beings, and I think we're learning, as you say, we're learning to drive the car. We're learning on how it works. We're learning which pedals to push. We're learning which levers to push and which gears to be in. And sometimes, we might put on the back wipers instead of indicating right. As long as it's in a safe way, that's okay. That's learning as well. But it's a really fascinating topic. I think we'll probably talk about this for a while to come, because there'll always be this, I think this I don't want to call it a group, I guess this view from people that are late adopters or those that actually don't trust what AI is doing. And trust is a big thing, right, when it comes to artificial intelligence. Um, but one of the other things that I want to touch on that we discussed in the first episode, so Alan was basically describing how large language model, I can't even talk anymore. Maybe I've got baby brain. LLMs,
Mm-hmm.
the basic sort of theory behind them of they take large reams of data and they aggregate it up, just in simple terms, right, to come up with an answer, to
Mm-hmm.
generate something, to make something up. Now, if that's what it's doing, um, how how much risk are we at that what the AI is producing as a solution is creating additional risk to decisions we're trying to make?
Could you give me a more concrete example?
Yeah, I guess so. Let's say, for example, you go into ChatGPT, right, and you say, you give it a great prompt, you give it all of the context, and there's a lot of great GPTs that folks have put out there as well. But you give it a context, you give it a scenario, and you say, this is my specific issue, and it gives you an answer, right? How do we know that the stuff it's distilled up to give you that answer isn't creating more risk? So the things around the context that we've spoken about. So, for example, um, ground conditions, environmental factors, the capability and capacity of the workforce, the supply chain, the nature of the contract. All
Mm-hmm.
projects are complex, right?
Got it. So the answer to the question is the exact same way that we do it today. And let me ask you two questions, maybe three. First question: how do you think? You and I are having a
How do I?
conversation. How did
Yeah.
you come up with the thing you're going to say next?
While I'm listening to the conversation, I'm thinking of different perspectives. I'm trying to be devil's advocate as well to ask the
Mm-hmm.
tough questions. So there's a whole thought process in my head going, I'm thinking about people listening to what we're talking about, and there'll be different questions that people might ask. And oh, by the way, if you do want to ask a question that I'm not asking, please put it in the chat. Um, but that's the thought process I'm going through to go, what value and outcome can I provide through this conversation between you and I for those listening or watching in?
That's it. Let's go all the way down to the deep level. Literally, what neurons are connecting to do that? You can't answer it. Is the answer. So it's like there's an element of blindness that even we have of ourselves, and
Yeah.
the second element, a bit of a fun question, Dale. How many how many consultants in the world go into a project and just make things worse?
A lot. I don't have the stats. We could probably
Just a
ask
feeling,
generative
yes.
AI, but a
How
lot.
did the senior people on those projects decide that the thing the consultants were pitching them was a good idea that turned out to be a really bad idea?
They don't. They go by reputation and brand, right? And unfortunately, that's not a great place to be.
Mm-hmm. So
And
to answer your question, when I said when you asked how do we kind of gauge this AI, there's something that I've noticed in the market, and I haven't found a piece of literature that actually gives me the name to it. So I'm just going to call it um, the the principle of higher standards, which is when a new player comes in a market, they must perform to a disproportionately higher standard to compete with the reputation or brand of those already in the market. That happens with consultants. So if you've got someone just going out on their own, the chances of them competing with one of the big boys straight away is very few. They're going to have to pull on relationships they already have. The same with technology. People will look less favorably on technology, and then if you couple that with the fact that it is, in essence, competition of reputation, where there are always laggards in an industry where, there were people who burnt down factories in the industrial era because they were losing their cottage little knitting business and these kinds of things. There'll be people who shout and say this is a terrible thing to happen. All they're kind of doing is delaying the inevitable by an ever so slight amount. I say that the way that we judge it is the way you judge anything. It's you ask for justification, you ask for evidence, and you develop systems and processes that don't have single points of failure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I guess at least to me it does. If it doesn't to you and you're listening in, please do ask, like I say. And then, okay, so take us through. We understand it, we trust it. We go, okay. I'm happy that I'm comfortable that I can use AI as a tool combined with the human intuition around me. So the guy or girl that's got 20, 30 years experience as an engineer, they can come to me and I can trust them equally as I can trust the AI solution. How adaptable is AI to changing circumstances? Because if I guess there's some that might be thinking, well, AI is programmed, right? So how can you program flexibility into AI to think on the spot? So let's say, for example, you've given it a scenario, it's plugged into your systems, you got everything from your Primavera P6 schedules linked into your AI solution through to your Excel tracker over here. Hopefully no one uses Excel anymore. Through
We
to
know
all
that's
various
not true.
tools, I know that's not true. You got nodes and links feeding in, you got endplan feeding in, you got all the other software vendors feeding into an AI solution. Let's say it's all talking together, right? How adaptable are these solutions to changing circumstances?
Again, it depends. I think one of the things I'd like people to take away from this is how to conceptually think in this instance about AI. In my conceptual model, saying AI is like saying animals. There are millions of them. Some of them are single-celled. Some of them are very complex. Some of them have crazy adaptability. Humans are crazily adaptable. Some of them are so specifically designed for the niche that they're in that they've just kind of stopped evolving and they're just dominating their niche. But if you took them out and put them in another niche, they'd fall apart. So if we kind of look at it at that context, it depends. There is this progression to try and get from specific AI, which is creation in a microcosm, to general AI, which is creation across use cases. There's kind of two ways of getting there, and it's kind of people random walk between the two. One way of getting there is glue loads of AI together, and it appears to be general. So, for example, imagine you had a bot that could take a question and decide which one of 10 buckets to put that question in, and you had a specific AI for each vertical. It would appear more general than the AI that's comprising it would make. The second element is to build the complexity of the AI so it can cope with 10 different sections of information. So this is the equivalent of taking the first one is deciding which animal to pick. I need to get to the bottom of the ocean. Probably bad and live. Probably bad to choose an elephant or a bird. Really good to choose a deep sea octopus. I need to get to the top of a mountain. Bad to choose a whale. probably good to choose a bird or a mountain goat or something like that kind of thing, versus the one which is like humanity, which is let's build a core that's so adaptable that it can invent the new things. It can invent climbing gear and coats, and it can invent submersibles and cameras, these kinds of things. And the way that I would look at AI in the context of projects is, and this is my kind of second perspective of how I try and make decisions, AI is just a tool. Tools automate tasks. People fulfill roles. Roles are made up of many responsibilities. Responsibilities are made up of workflows. Workflows are made up of tasks. To do a role, you do many, many tasks glued together. I'm thinking to myself, how do I automate the report I have to write on Friday? How do I get good suggestions for having a team building meeting that I'm running on Tuesday? What is a good template I can use to communicate information to senior leadership on Wednesday? What are risks that I should be aware of that I might not have thought about in this program on Thursday? So individual tasks. Now, taking that perspective, a rational human, which is difficult, but a rational human that's trying to just make their life as easy as possible will, if they're trained, will use the tool that is the least effort. What people actually do is use the tool that they feel most comfortable with. That's what humans actually do. But then that's a thing of comfort and familiarity, which is why some designers design AI to talk, because then it feels familiar. Therefore, people accept it more. That was the genius in my eyes of ChatGPT. ChatGPT, they had the tech to do that for years. What they did is glue a front end on it that made it easy for people to interact with and relate. And the answers were conversational. That's the genius, not that it could do all that stuff. Anyway, so if you think about it in these tasks, the framework that I described about how do you build this general AI? Well, you could build an AI to do each one of those tasks just better for a person, and then glue them together, and then you've got an AI agent of some kind. Or you could propel this general framework a long way, but it will hit a glass ceiling. And for me, the glass ceiling is the division between real world and digital world. If you take professions, the barrier of the glass ceiling to me is accountability and human relationships. Now, you may argue, oh, we could go into a metaverse and have relationships. Yeah, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. What I mean by this is things like lawyers. Lawyers and accountants are at the most risk of being automated by AI. Sales outreach as well, customer support. These are all absolutely at the forefront of being automated. But the top lawyers know that the book of clients that they've got is because of the dedication and relationships that they have with those people, plus the accountability that someone can go, you mess this up, go and fix it. Now, in their office, they might, instead of having 20 juniors typing away, they might have 10 juniors who are skilled at using AI to produce the same work. But it's still a partner. Still a partner having a relationship with a company. And I see the same thing happening in projects where rather than a project controls team of 50 people, you might have 40 or 30 people on the same project who are skilled at using a new tool that makes them more productive, but it is still the person who's going to the client and going, I'm going to be late. And this is what we're going to do about it. Now, the final point is people might then go, oh, well, that's 50 to 30. That's a problem. No. There's a principle, and I forget the name of the principle now, but it was actually kind of it really started gaining weight where people did an economic analysis on Uber. Long story short, if you make something more productive, more of it will be bought. So Uber lowered the price of taxis, but the taxi market went through the roof more than the amount that they lowered the cost of travel. Now, we could have an argument about, yeah, but it doesn't pay its drivers, blah, blah. That's kind of, I'm looking macroscopically now. That's a microcosm of that company. But in this case, it would be, if you make projects less expensive, more of them will fall into a positive business case. So more of them will be bought. And then what that's been shown to do is that more jobs actually get created. And that's actually this thing about when people, that is the fundamental bit, the argument that people are actually making when they say it won't get rid of jobs. What they actually mean is it will remove the need for jobs at the individual level, but expand jobs at the global level.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, Greg, I guess it comes back to economics 101, right?
Yeah.
Demand and supply and price point. And if I reflect on what you're saying there, using your animal analogy and glass ceiling, I think there's only so much space on Noah's Ark for the animals, which is the glass ceiling. But then you delve into the fact that people will require fewer heads, let's say, resources on projects.
Fewer heads per unit of work, not fewer heads overall. Per unit of work, yeah.
But if we go with that notion, we go, okay, well, AI can supplement a lot of the mandrolic handle-turning tasks on projects. What about how do managers, leaders then manage the reliance on AI in their teams? So, yep, I'm happy. I've got a team of people, and I encourage them to use the tech out there because I love the tech. But how do we encourage those using the tech and train them not only on how it works, but how to use it effectively? Because I don't think anyone's training anyone on how to use it effectively.
That's a beautiful question. And I'll explain why I think it's a beautiful question first. Once something in human society becomes known as inevitable, then people figure out how to live with it. That was a live with it question after an inevitability. It is inevitable. The answer for this, the best answer for this, for me, comes from farming. 100 years ago, a much greater percentage of the first world, in terms of population, was engaged in farming. Now, a lot less are engaged in farming, but we've upped our farming output. We've done that with machines, and actually intelligent machines, ones that can actually go and spray crops and decide when to harvest and integrate weather data and fly drones themselves. Like, it's got pretty damn advanced farming. But you still have people working in farming using that technology that are 70, 80 years old. And at the heart of it, for me, is three things. Number one is necessity. They would go out of business if they didn't, because it is just so productive. Number two is inclusivity of design. So designing tech in a way, designing it for humans, not designing it for task. That's a very, very crucial thing, because it's how do you make operating a phone easy for your granddad? That kind of thing. And then the third element of that is a natural evolution of the cycle of teaching. So you know that people generally fall into a parabola. You've got early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards, this kind of thing. And they move through an industry. Typically, laggards are at the top end of the industry. They're the oldest or the most close to retirement or dropping out. So as new tech comes in, they naturally are the first to actually just get pushed off the cliff and do that. And then what you've come in with is the modern generation. Everyone knows whatever modern generation you pick, they're always just the most comfortable with the most modern tech. So what happens is, so long as you have a natural balance in teams of experience and age, you'll naturally draw in that kind of perspective. So, I'd be unbelievably surprised if a construction company that had a graduate scheme wasn't getting graduates going, oh, I made this project report using AI, and then a project manager's going, using what? I'm pretty sure that's happening in every company that has that structure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the adoption rates are certainly increasing. I mean, if we just take 6 months ago, people are becoming more and more familiar with what is out there and how to use it. I think there's many more rabbit holes we can go down in future episodes around, what's the long-term consequences, what are the ethics around it as well, and data privacy, etc., because we know as much as you are using a tool or technology, specifically something that's free, generally something's free, you're the product. We know that. So we got to be curious, but I think we also have to be a bit cautious. So with time running out, I think we'll park those for future episodes, Greg. But I think we've certainly opened a few cans of worms for the four of us to get back together on episode 3. We'll try and squeeze in episode 3 before the end of the year if we can. But folks, look out for when episode 3 will happen. We'll schedule it on LinkedIn, so please do follow us on LinkedIn. Please do subscribe to the podcast on YouTube as well. We'll look to go both live on LinkedIn as well as YouTube in the new year as well, so we can get more of your questions answered. And with 4 of us, hopefully, touch wood, from the new year, we'll be able to challenge each other more and ask more deep diving questions, because that's the point of this, is to provide you, the listener, the viewer, with the perspective. And again, if you have any topics you'd like us to cover in the future, please do let us know about that as well. But Greg, any final thoughts before we end off this pod?
I would only leave with 2 final thoughts. Number 1 is, if you're listening to this, you're already well ahead of the curve because you're interested in it, and interest breeds experiment. Experiment breeds experience. Experience breeds habit. Habit breeds capability. So people are already ahead of the curve. And the second thing, actually, is, Dale, just something for you, me, Val, and Alan to have a look at. I think to really make this real for people, I'd discuss what would an AI first project consultancy look like.
Yeah.
And if we dive into that, I think it would make it very real for people. So, like, would we write project reports? Why? Like, I'm not wasting people's time doing that. I'm spending, £80 an hour on someone writing it. No, I'm not doing that. Am I going to get someone at £120 an hour checking yes, oh God, I get an even better quality report for less money. So this could be something that we just dive into and make it real.
Absolutely. I think those are 2 fascinating areas, and I'm sure those that listen to this either now live or recorded will definitely tune into that. But look, let's end it there. One last thing to say is that if you're listening or watching this live, the video feed isn't as good quality as when we post the recording, so look out on Spotify or Google podcast, Apple Podcast, for the recorded version, which will be much better. But thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. If we don't see you before the end of the new year, have a fantastic festive season from all of us, all 4 of us, although there's only myself and Greg on this one. But thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch up with you on the next one. Bye for now.
Yes.